Have you ever been in a relationship where from the outside, there seems to be absolutely no reason to break up? No abuse, no betrayal, no grand, earth-shattering shocks that force you to pack your bags and walk out the door immediately. Each day passes by peacefully. There are still moments of joy here and there, and you keep telling yourself, it's really not that bad. But deep down, an invisible death sentence is being carried out. It's called the silent eraser. You aren't dying from a fatal wound. You are slowly dying to your own identity. You shave away pieces of yourself, shrink your presence, and mold yourself into a more palatable version, just to keep the relationship from falling apart. This is especially true in Western society, where we are constantly conditioned to be responsible, patient, and never selfish. It is the sheer terror of being labeled selfish that drives you to build the perfect excuses for your partner. He's not a bad guy. She still takes care of the family. Maybe I'm just asking for too much. But let's be honest with ourselves for once. The cold truth is, you aren't staying because of love. You are staying because you haven't found a reason bad enough to leave. In her renowned book, Too Good to Leave, Too Bad to Stay, Mira Kirschenbaum exposes a fatal flaw in our thinking. You are quietly trading your standards for your tolerance. Instead of asking, is this relationship nurturing who I truly am? You ask, how much more of this can I take? A relationship doesn't need to be filled with trauma to deserve an end. Just because you aren't hurting doesn't mean you are being loved. To see the bigger picture of this endurance game, let's shift our perspective for a moment. Let's travel to the sun-drenched, windy music nights of Austin, Texas, to meet Julian, a 32-year-old software engineer. Behind the facade of a textbook, Successful Life in This Tech Hub, Julian was facing a silent battle that so many modern men choose to keep hidden. Every Thursday night, a small bar on the outskirts of Austin would fill with the sound of acoustic guitars. Julian used to be the star there. He would hold his old Gibson, singing folk melodies that were wild and free. That was the Julian of 5 years ago, before he met Clara. Clara was a brilliant financial analyst. She was sharp, organized, practical, and had a life roadmap perfectly programmed like an algorithm. When they got together, everyone said Julian had hit the jackpot. Clara didn't control his finances, never forbade him from hanging out with friends, and always prepared a neat diet salad box for him to take to work every morning. Everything was perfect, except for the fact that Julian felt himself fading away, like a photograph left out in the sun. The structural fatigue in their marriage began with the smallest things. Julian was spontaneous by nature. One starry weekend night, he looked out the window and said, "Clara, let's go camping at Big Bend Park tonight. I just checked the weather forecast, and it's beautiful." Clara looked up from her Excel spreadsheet, her eyes gentle, yet entirely rational. "Julian, we haven't booked a spot in advance. Going now would be too risky and exhausting for the upcoming work week. Let's do it next month, okay?" Next month never came, and dozens of Julian's other spontaneous ideas vanished in the exact same way. Clara was always right. Her logic always overpowered his artistry. She never raised her voice. She simply wrapped him in the comfort of safety. To be a responsible husband by North American societal standards, Julian began to self-adjust. He shifted into a state of living cautiously, rather than living authentically. Before speaking an idea aloud, he would mentally debate himself first to see if it sounded rational to Clara. He began to leave his guitar in the corner of the closet, focused on writing code that brought in big money, and learned to speak less of his dreams and need less of his free space. He shrank himself into a well-behaved developer, his own shrunk version. Julian was trapped in the trap of hope. Whenever he felt suffocated to the point of choking, he would look at short-term progress. Whenever he stayed silent for too long, Clara would notice and proactively book a romantic dinner at a luxury restaurant or buy him an expensive jacket. That kindness acted as a numbing mechanism. He would tell himself again, "She loves me so much. I'm just being overly sensitive and selfish." He regretted 5 years of his youth, regretted the joint mortgage on their Austin home, and dreaded losing the praise of both families. The classic sunk cost fallacy. Leaving just because she is too perfect and I feel suffocated? In America, people would call him a terrible, reckless man who didn't know how to appreciate happiness. He had unknowingly traded his standards for his tolerance. The awakening came on Julian's 32nd birthday. Clara threw him a surprise party with his tech company colleagues. They showered him with expensive gifts, raising their glasses to toast his success. Amidst the laughter and chatter, Julian looked into the restroom mirror. He saw a man in a crisp shirt, his hair neatly combed, but his eyes were completely hollow. He suddenly remembered the messy-haired guy in the torn t-shirt, belted out songs of freedom 5 years ago. He didn't hate Clara, but he realized that while he had never suffered a single wound by her side, he was no longer being nurtured either. That night, after everyone had left, Julian stumbled upon a chapter of Too Good to Leave, Too Bad to Stay on a psychology blog. The ultimate question stared back at him, cold and clinical. If everything stays exactly as it is for the next 5 to 10 years, can you accept it? A chill ran down Julian's spine. 10 years from now, he would have more money and a higher position, but Julian, the free-spirited artist, would be completely erased. His prolonged hesitation all this time was, in reality, an active decision to betray himself. The next morning, Clara woke up to find Julian sitting at the dining table, his Gibson guitar dusted off and resting by his feet. "Julian, aren't you heading to the office early today?" Clara asked, holding her iPad, which was displaying the day's schedule. Julian looked at Clara. His eyes held no resentment, only ultimate internal honesty. "Clara, I'm not going to the office anymore, and I'm not staying in this house either." Clara froze, her eyes widening in confusion. "What are you talking about? What did I do wrong? We haven't even been fighting." "You did nothing wrong. You are a perfect wife." Julian stood up, picking up his guitar. "But by your side, I chose to live cautiously instead of authentically. This house isn't too bad to leave, but it's no longer good enough for me to be myself. I have to go before I forget how to write a song." Julian walked out the door, the car engine roaring to life in the sun-drenched Austin morning. For the first time in years, he whistled a new melody. He didn't know his next destination yet, but he knew he had just saved his life's identity before it vanished forever. 1. The symptom. How do you know you've set foot into this danger zone? The biggest trap is that we usually wait for a glaring sign, an explosive fight, an act of betrayal, or the straw that breaks the camel's back. But no, the instability in a not-that-bad relationship masks itself in a completely different form. Psychologists call it structural fatigue. It's like a house with a cracked foundation. From the outside, the walls still stand tall and the roof still keeps out the rain, but the internal structure is under crushing pressure, on the verge of collapsing at any moment. You aren't intensely sad. You just feel tired. You are exhausted from constantly adjusting your behavior just to keep the peace. You are drained from living in a perpetual state of asking yourself, "Am I just being too difficult?" And so, the process of self-erosion begins, very quietly, very rationally, and with an overwhelming sense of responsibility. You shift from living authentically to living cautiously. Just look at the way you communicate every day. Do you find yourself overthinking before you speak? Do you mentally edit your words just because you're terrified of making your partner uncomfortable? You've started walking on eggshells in your very own home. Slowly but surely, you learn to say less of what you actually think and need less of what you actually want. You convince yourself that lowering your personal needs is a sign of maturity and grace. You use tons of logic, circumstances, and obligations to justify that the relationship is still fine. All while your intuition, the voice screaming inside, packed its bags and left a long time ago. You are imprisoning yourself inside a shrunk version, a submissive, diminished version of your true self. The clearest and most painful sign appears when you are completely alone. That is the moment you suddenly remember who you were before entering this relationship. It's not some childish, romantic nostalgia. It is a deep mourning for a self that once existed. A person who used to be freer in thought, more decisive in choices, and more aligned with personal values. You realize just how vibrant and full of energy you used to be. A healthy relationship is supposed to be a sanctuary where you grow. But if year after year, you find yourself standing still, adapting just to survive, and longing for the person you used to be, that is not patience. That is a red flag showing that you are trading your internal honesty for a cheap, counterfeit peace. 2. The trap. So, what exactly has kept you imprisoned in that gray zone for all these years? The book's answer will shock many of us. What's holding you back isn't love, it's a psychological trap called hope. In America and Western societies, we are conditioned to view hope as a noble virtue. But in a relationship that has run completely dry of life force, hope is a drug, not a virtue. It is a numbing agent of delay. You aren't staying because of what is happening in the present. You are staying because of a hypothetical future version that you've painted in your own mind. If only they changed. Or if only circumstances were different. You are committing a fatal mistake, loving an imaginary potential, instead of looking directly at the concrete human being standing right in front of you. You are taking your current survival hostage for the sake of an ambiguous future. This addiction to hope is masterfully fed by short-term improvements. Let's be completely honest. Isn't it true that every time you hint at letting go, or whenever the relationship hits absolute rock bottom, your partner suddenly becomes incredibly kind? They apologize sincerely, they get romantic, they make grand promises. You breathe a sigh of relief and tell yourself, see, they are getting better. But wake up. The book exposes a harsh truth that is merely a behavioral shift under the threat of abandonment, not an organic capacity for self-evolution. The moment the storm passes and the pressure vanishes, the mask of effort falls off, and everything snaps right back to the old baseline. That is not progress. That is a toxic loop masquerading as hope. To break this trap, you must learn to distinguish between two concepts: a temporary crisis and a structural flaw. A temporary crisis stems from external circumstances, work pressure, financial strain, or the exhausting phase of raising children. It can drain both of you for a season, but the foundation remains solid. A structural flaw, however, is entirely different. It is a long-standing mismatch of core values, a chronic lack of empathy, and a deep-seated absence of respect that has dragged on for years. Too many people mistake a structural flaw for a rough patch, waiting for a change that will never come. And finally, you are stuck because of the sunk cost fallacy. 5 years, 10 years, your youth, your energy, your joint plans. You grieve what you have already invested. The fear of loss drives you to pour more time and more life force into a gambling game you already know you're destined to lose. You are terrified that if you walk away, it means admitting you were wrong in the past. But the truth is, you cannot redeem the past by continuing to destroy your own future. 3. The shift. It's time to flip the script on your mindset. Americans and North Americans in general are incredibly sensitive to the concept of losing agency, the terrifying feeling of losing control over your own life. You might tell yourself, I haven't left yet because I haven't decided. I'm still figuring things out. But this book slaps you with a cold dose of reality. Indecision is a decision. Prolonged hesitation is an active, deliberate choice. Every single morning you wake up, choose to stay in that house, and continue to tolerate that exact same structure. It's not because you haven't thought it through enough, and it's certainly not because you lack information. You know the answer all too well. In reality, you are choosing to stay just to dodge the consequences of leaving. Sitting on the fence doesn't mean you are a passive bystander. By not leaving, you are actively hitting the renew button on the slow erosion of your own identity. Pay close attention to this dangerous psychological flip. When a relationship has a structural flaw, instead of questioning the relationship, you turn around and question yourself. You constantly second-guess your most basic human needs. Am I asking for too much? Or am I just being selfish? You seek out advice from friends, therapists, or podcasts like this one, not to uncover the truth, but to find an alibi. You tell your story in a way that downplays your partner's faults, desperately fishing for validation from an outsider who will tell you, well, it's not that bad. Wake up. When you have to rely on a mountain of other people's logic just to convince yourself that you are okay, that is the absolute smoking gun that your relationship is fundamentally broken. To end this endless cycle of rationalization, author Mira Kirschenbaum hands you an ultimate deciding question. It's a classic American approach, practical, song-fang, fair and square, direct and utterly unavoidable. Right now, close your eyes, take a deep breath, and ask yourself, if everything stays exactly as it is, nothing gets worse, but nothing gets better. 5 or 10 years from now, can you accept living a life like that? Look squarely at the human being standing in front of you today, not the idealized potential in your imagination. If your answer is no, then staying one more day is an act of fundamental dishonesty toward your own future. You don't need more time to observe. You just need more courage to admit what your intuition discovered a long time ago. There is a comforting lie we often whisper to ourselves. Let's just give it more time, and everything will become clear. But the cold truth is, time does not bring clarity. It is merely a highly sophisticated numbing mechanism. Time doesn't make your relationship any better. It just conditions you to get used to a life that no longer belongs to you. You get used to saying less, you get used to needing less, and you get used to accepting a shrunken, barren version of yourself. That inner silence is not peace, it is emotional callousness. You aren't becoming more certain, you are simply losing your capacity to fight back. Remember, this life has no neutral state. Between self-betrayal and self-actualization, you are forced to choose one. Every morning you decide to stay in an eroding relationship, you aren't being patient, kind, or forgiving. That is the day you actively put pen to paper and sign the contract to continue betraying yourself. You are teaching your own brain a toxic lesson, that a counterfeit external peace is worth more than your entire self-esteem and your true self. Are you genuinely ready to take responsibility for that decision to erase yourself in the years to come? There is a profound Western proverb, "The truth will set you free." Walking away when things aren't that bad yet is not an impulsive act, and it is most certainly not selfish. It is the ultimate form of internal honesty. It is the moment you courageously stand up, look the other person in the eye, and say, "I respect our past, but I have a moral responsibility to my own future." Don't wait for the house to completely collapse before you decide to run. Walk out while you are still you, before your identity is wiped away without a trace. Life is just too short to live in a version of yourself that is perfectly tailored to fit someone else, yet suffocatingly tight for you. You deserve to be nurtured, not to just exist and endure. Thank you for staying with me until the end of this video. If today's reflections resonated with you, feel free to leave your thoughts in the comments. Sometimes, a simple conversation can open the door to something far deeper than we expect. And if you're drawn to feminine psychology, soft power, and the emotional depth behind human connection, subscribe to Velune Her so we can continue exploring the quiet influence of feminine energy together. I'll see you in the next video.